Hello and welcome to Physiological Factors Screencast. Today's focus is going to be on energy systems, specifically how we get energy to perform muscular contractions and therefore perform in sporting actions. Now before that, what I want to do is just give you a quick overview of the sequence of where we're going in lessons and why we're kind of taking that route. So if we have a look first up, the first thing we looked at movement analysis, we looked at agonist, antagonist muscles, movements at joints, etc. Following that, we had a look at the motor unit. We had to look at specifically how the motor unit controls muscular contractions. The next thing we looked at was muscle fibers. Okay, so muscle fibers was the absolute key to unlock the way we're going to have a look through the rest of the specification, because once we understand muscle fibers, okay, this is our threshold concept, we can then start to have a look at the other focuses such as energy systems, components of fitness, and ergogenic aids. Now I'll put down the threshold concept of muscle fibers here, and then our key bits of information from the specification we're going to go on to next and explain why it's so important. So what we're going to do now is we're going to split our focus towards an anaerobic approach to physiology, for example that high intensity work that doesn't require oxygen to break down fuels, and then aerobic physiology which does require oxygen. So we're going to start by looking at anaerobic physiology. So after we did our muscle fibers, we looked at the different types of fibers. For example here, look at anaerobic muscle fibers, for example, you've got fast oxidative glycolytic type 2A, and you've also got fast glycolytic type 2B. They are our anaerobic muscle fibers. Now, as a result of that, our next kind of sequence of lessons is going to really have a look at how, each of these concepts down here applies to anaerobic physiology. High intensity, sprinters, rugby tackles, weightlifting. We'll be looking at how our knowledge of kind of these things apply just to anaerobic physiology. So, for example, we're going to be looking at two energy systems, ATP, PC, and glycolytic. Today's focus is going to be this. Then we're going to have a look at kind of muscular strength. So how you train for muscular strength, what the adaptations are, same with flexibility. And finally, we're going to have a look at ergogenic aids, or you might know this as kind of supplements, I suppose, or anything that helps us perform anaerobically. Following on from that, after that, our next sequence of lessons, we'll be looking at aerobic physiology in a slightly different angle. Okay, so with oxygen and how all of these concepts differ over here. So that's just an overview of where we're going. So I think we're at a really important point now in physiology because we've hit our threshold topic, which is muscle fibers. Okay, so let's have a look then. So if we start off, energy for exercise then, our key focus, the specification, what's this asking for? We have to know about this concept of ATP. So we need to know what ATP is, and we need to know why it is so vital for us to produce energy. Okay, and as a result of that, we're going to have a look at these things here. I'm not going to explain too much about that now because that's going to be the focus of the lesson. So we're also going to have a look at this in today's screencast. We're going to have a look at the ATP PC system, and then by the end of it, you need to be able to do the following things coming down here. You do not need to make any notes on this. Everything that I've done so far is just a kind of introduction to what we're going to do in today's screencast. So let's have a look then. So our focus, of course, first up is going to be looking at ATP. So you get an understanding of what it is and how it helps us produce energy, the process of it, and then how we get it back using energy systems. So let's have a look then. Okay, so at the moment, this might be for some people, you might have covered it, GCSE biology. That would be the only subject I think you would have covered this in. So let's have a look then. The role of adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so what does it do? Why is it so important? So first up, let's have a look what the chemical makeup is. Okay, so if you look here, you've got one adenosine and three phosphate molecules. So your job there, three phosphates. So your job is just to make sure you know that that is the physiological or chemical makeup of this kind of important process within PE and energy. Where is it located then? Okay, so it's located in the muscle sarcoplasm. Okay, so we've talked about this as well when we talked about things such as phosphocreatine, muscle fibers, mitochondria, etc. On top of that, we need to know why it is so important. And this is without doubt the most important thing you're going to write down, because ATP, okay, or adenosine triphosphate, is absolutely vital to us when we're taking part in physical activity, because it is the energy currency of the body and it's the only usable energy source. This is the key bit. This is the most important bit of information on this slide. Okay, because I'll use this example here of energy currency of the body. You think now, let's just take it away from sport. Okay, you think you go on holiday. Let's say you go somewhere in the European Union. I don't know, you go to Portugal. When you go to Portugal, you have to change your money from pounds into euros. Okay, euros is the only way you can spend money when you go to the European Union. And it's exactly the same with kind of energy. So ATP is the only way you can spend energy. So we have to use this to give us our energy. It's the only usable energy source. Now, this only usable, there's a problem with it, I suppose. Okay, and that's to do with the duration. So when you actually use ATP to provide ourselves with energy, it only lasts for 3 seconds, or 2 to 3 seconds of high intensity anaerobic work. Okay, so that gives us a bit of a problem. Okay, because at the moment then we haven't got, so once we've done that 3 seconds, we need to think about kind of how we're going to get it back. But before that, I suppose we need to have an understanding of the following. How does ATP give us the 3 seconds of energy? So we've said all this stuff here: 1-adenosine, 3-phosphate, stored in the muscle sarcoplasm. It's the energy currency. It's the only usable energy source, and it lasts for 3 seconds of high intensity anaerobic. What we haven't got an understanding at the moment is, how does it happen? So it starts like this. How does that actually produce energy? So let's have a look then. Okay, so what you have, ATP needs to break down in order to provide us energy. Okay, and we have to know a kind of chemical equation for this to be able to kind of get an exam credit and also to help our understand it. So if I start off, I'll put our kind of adenosine and 3-phosphates there. What I'm going to do is just take you through this, and you can kind of just watch it and then make some, maybe pause it and then make some notes after that. Okay, so ATP breakdown then. So if I got on here, if you note here, in between the phosphates are high energy bonds. Okay, so that might be just something to make a diagram of at the moment. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if I take you through, I will talk you through it, and then I'll put some kind of notes on the screencast that you can kind of see and kind of make notes and look back through if you need to. So looking at here, you've got adenosine triphosphate then, and you have an enzyme called ATPase. Now ATPase, okay, is absolutely vital, because if anything is going to be broken down, for example a fuel, this is located in your muscle, to break it down, an enzyme has to do that. So if you watch this, ATPase breaks ATP down, or breaks off the 3-phosphate, and energy is released. Okay, so it was, if I just go back onto there, ATP, then ATPase breaks off the 3-phosphate, and that releases energy, and that gives us our 3 seconds of work. So visually you can see it was adenosine, 3-phosphate, and then enzyme broke off the 3-phosphate, so then it left adenosine, 2-phosphate, or what's called diphosphate, plus an energy, plus the phosphate that's spare. So if you want to put that into words, it looks something like this. So from here, you have to know the fuel that it started. So the start point was ATP, because it was adenosine, triphosphate, or 3-phosphate. You have to put triphosphate. Then you have an enzyme called ATPase, or ATPase, and this breaks down ATP. And as a result of the breakdown, as you can see here, up above you, you've got here, it leaves. What does it leave? What is left? Okay, so what is remaining? Well, it's adenosine diphosphate. So there's 2-phosphate, adenosine diphosphate, plus phosphate, plus energy. And that is, at the moment, that's the thing. That is the process by which you get that 3 seconds of energy. So that's what needs to be in your notes at the moment. You need to make sure you've got those done. If you want to see that in a kind of a shorthand version, you've got ATP there, enzyme ATPase, that the arrow then leads to ADP plus P plus energy. Okay, so that is the process by which you get 3 seconds of work. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, this leads us to a problem. Okay, and the key problem is that if ATP has been broken down to ADP plus P plus energy, we have no usable energy source left, because remember, it's only ATP that can provide us with energy. So if we have been broke it down to ADP plus P plus E, there's no ATP left. So our 3 seconds has gone. How are we going to get that back? Now, if I give you the analogy of this as a phone battery, imagine you've got a phone battery, or you have got a phone battery, and you imagine you compare that to ATP, because ATPs are kind of the battery for energy in our body, whereas in a phone, we use a phone battery to give us the energy to make calls or do whatever on that phone. Now, if you imagine you had a terrible, terrible phone battery that only lasted 3 seconds, that could be your ATP. So when you're in that position where you've run out of battery, what do you have to do? Well, you can see here, you have to charge or rebuild that battery, resynthesize, and that's exactly what happens when ATP runs out. We use 3 energy systems as 3 chargers to kind of rebuild or resynthesize ATP so we can use it again. So I'll put the solution down here. So ATP has to be resynthesized by 3 energy systems. If you're looking at a phone analogy, it'd be 3 chargers. So what are these energy systems called? Well, the first one's called the ATP-PC system. That's what we're focusing on today. Okay, it's an anaerobic system and it provides us with 10 seconds of energy. So once the ATP's been broken down, it gives us 2 to 3 seconds. Then we need to use PC alongside ATP to get us that kind of ATP back and give us 10 seconds of energy. The other charger we can use or energy system is a glycolytic system. Okay, you can just have a read of that there. We'll do that next lesson. And then the final one is the aerobic system, which provides us longer periods of energy, but takes longer to do, and it's an aerobic system. So at the moment there, this slide now, do you need to write it down? I would say it's something that will just get you into the fact that ATP gives us 3 seconds, but in order to get it back and use it again, because it's the only usable energy source, we have to use the energy systems to do that. And the first one we're going to look at, what we're going to look at now, is the PC system, or the ATP PC system from here then. So energy system 1, there's ups on there, the ATP-PC system. I've shown you where we finished before, so adenosine diphosphate plus phosphate. So what happens then? So in our muscle cells, as you know, we have phosphocreatine. So high levels of phosphocreatine, certainly in our fast-twitch 2B fibres. You don't have to write that, but ultimately we've got PC, so that's abbreviated there. 1 phosphate, 1 creatine. Now, what we need now, because we've only got ADP plus P plus energy, and that's been used for 3 seconds, we now need to break down phosphocreatine. Okay, so phosphocreatine is broken down, or PC is broken down by the enzyme creatine kinase. Now, when that happens, you will see here that as a result of that, it's broken down. So PC is broken down into P plus C, and this is to symbolize energy. So what happens here, okay, as you can see, is that energy is used to fuse the spare P back to ADP to form ATP. And that gives us 10 seconds of energy. So if I just now put you, kind of put that into written terms, I think sometimes you can see it. Hopefully I've talked through and you could see that process happening. If you're going to put that into kind of words, the fuel that allows this to happen is phosphocreatine, or PC. Okay, we did a bit of work on that last lesson. The enzyme that breaks down, because if you have a fuel and you want energy, an enzyme is the only thing that can break it down. It's broken down by creatine kinase, and the product from the reaction is it's split up into P plus C plus energy. Okay, and then the final thing you have to be able to do is to say that the energy that was produced from here is used to fuse, so E plus P plus ADP equals 1 ATP, and we get it back, and that gives us 10 seconds of work. So these are your keynotes, okay, for this, to explain how PC is used to resynthesize ATP. So if you want some additional stuff on here, if you still think that you could do some, I don't know, slightly longer explanation, I'll put these up here. These are not really, this would make it difficult to get marks, but this is just as an understanding, a couple of points just to make sure. So energy from the PC breakdown is used to fuse a spare P to ADP to form ATP. So I've kind of talked about that there. And then E plus P plus ADP equals 1 ATP. We synthesize. So I've kind of put it down here. This is the stuff, this is what you need to be able to do really by the end of the lesson. Okay, the stuff down here, and this is just to help understanding if you'd lost it a little bit when we were talking about the breakdown of PC. So what happens? What's the kind of the kind of final thing, just to make sure we know here, that this system, the breakdown of ATP, okay, to give us 3 seconds, then the breakdown of PC to rebuild or resynthesize ATP using this equation here, okay, gives us 10 seconds of high intensity anaerobic work. You're talking about shot put, you're talking about weightlifting, kind of clean and jerk, you're talking about rugby tackles, you're talking about shot put, you're talking about 100-meter sprints, okay, you're talking about all these things that are extremely high intensity anaerobic work, because as we know, phosphocreatine is located in our muscle cell. It can be broke down quickly without oxygen. Okay, so what I'd ask you to do then, there are your notes. Make sure you've got good questions on them. Just to make sure you see how this system fits in as a whole, you can have a look at this as a visual. Okay, so this would show you how the system works in general. ATP, ATPase equals ADP plus P plus energy. Okay, that gives us 3 seconds. Now, because our 3 seconds are up, and we need to get this back, we've only got this now, PC is broken down by creatine kinase to equal P plus C plus energy. Now, that's that. Now, what I would ask you to do as a revision task before you come into the lesson is just to have a look at this. Do you feel like you could talk about the ATP PC system, Okay, by having a practice. This is where we're going to be working in the lesson. The only things I don't need you to do at the moment are the red bits. You don't need to do that. So